The first time Clara Whitman ever held a gun, she was 37 years old, standing in the fluorescent glare of a Nevada big box store, and the pistol felt like a frozen bird in her hand. Light, wrong, and already trying to fly away. That was not where the story began, but it was the moment everything tilted. The real beginning was quieter. A Tuesday morning in Maplewood, Minnesota, in the fall of 2019, when Clara's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter with a single text from an unknown number. "It's not yours. I'm sorry." Below the words, a photograph. Her husband, Nate, asleep on a hotel pillow, a woman's bare arm draped across his chest like a seatbelt. The arm wore the same rose gold watch Clara had helped pick out for Nate's sister the Christmas before. Clara stared at the screen until the letters stopped making sense. Then she set the phone face down, finished pouring coffee for their 8-year-old daughter Ellie, and drove her to school as if the world still rotated on its usual axis. That night, after Ellie was in bed, Clara sat on the back steps with a glass of wine she didn't drink and watched the neighbor's motion sensor light flick on and off whenever the wind moved the maple tree. She thought very clearly, "I have spent 15 years making myself small enough to fit inside someone else's life." The realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt geological, like discovering a crack that had been widening for decades. Nate came home 2 days later smelling of airport and apology. He cried, she did not. They agreed on counseling. They agreed on transparency. They agreed on almost everything except the truth, that the marriage had died somewhere between the first lie and the last kiss goodnight, and neither of them had noticed the corpse cooling in the bed. 6 months of therapy taught Clara 2 things. First, that Nate was genuinely sorry and would probably never cheat again. Second, that being married to a man who would probably never cheat again was not the same as wanting to be married to him. She asked for a divorce on a Thursday in March 2020, the same week the world shut its doors. The timing felt obscene, like breaking a vase during a funeral, but waiting for a better moment seemed as delusional as everything else. Nate moved into the basement temporarily. The schools closed. Ellie learned long division on a laptop in the dining room, while Clara taught 4th grade over Zoom from the couch, muted half the time so her students wouldn't hear her crying. Money evaporated. Nate's sales job dried up. Clara's district froze salaries. The mortgage, once manageable, grew teeth. They sold the Subaru, then the kayak Nate never used, then the good dishes from their wedding. One night in May, Clara woke at 3 a.m. to find Ellie standing beside her bed. "Mommy, are we going to be poor?" Clara pulled her daughter under the covers. "We're going to be careful," she whispered. "There's a difference." But careful wasn't enough. By August, the bank sent a letter with the word foreclosure in bold. Clara read it in the driveway so Ellie wouldn't see. That was when her sister, Ruth, called from Reno. "Come out here," Ruth said. "Just for a year. I've got the spare room, the schools are open, you can breathe." Clara laughed, a sound like tearing paper. "I can't just move to Nevada." "Why not? The house is underwater. Nate can sell it, pay off what he can, start over. You get distance, Ellie gets sunshine. You both get a new zip code where nobody knows your marriage exploded." Clara thought of the frozen bird in her hand that day at the store, the one she'd set back on the shelf because who buys a gun when they've never even fired a BB gun at summer camp? She had been looking for something that felt like control. She hadn't found it in the sporting goods aisle. Maybe control was on the other side of the country. They left Minnesota on a Wednesday in September, everything they owned crammed into a U-Haul and Ruth's old Highlander. Ellie fell asleep somewhere in Nebraska, clutching the stuffed narwhal Nate had won for her at the state fair the summer everything was still pretend. Nevada smelled like sagebrush and hot pennies. Ruth's bungalow sat at the edge of Reno, where the subdivision surrendered to desert. The first morning, Clara woke to find Ellie on the back patio, staring at mountains that looked CGI. "Mom," she said, awestruck, "there's no humidity. My hair is confused." Ruth worked nights as a nurse, so the days belonged to Clara and Ellie. They hiked the hills behind the house. They learned that tarantulas migrate in the fall and are gentler than Minnesotan mosquitoes. They discovered that grief travels light if you keep moving. Clara found a job substitute teaching, then a permanent fourth-grade classroom in a school where half the kids qualified for free lunch, and every single one of them called her Miss Whitman with perfect, ferocious respect. She started running at dawn, 3 miles, then 5, then 10. The desert didn't care that her marriage had failed or that she sometimes still checked Nate's Instagram at 2 a.m., like a tongue probing a missing tooth. The desert simply asked her lungs to work harder. One January morning, 6 months after they arrived, Clara jogged past a hand-painted sign tacked to a telephone pole. Women's Intro to Handguns, Saturday, 9 a.m. to safe, supportive, no experience needed, silver out of range. She almost kept running. Instead, she stopped, hands on knees, breath sighing in and out, and took a picture of the flyer. That night she asked Ruth, "Do you think it's crazy that I want to learn how to shoot?" Ruth didn't even look up from chopping onions. "I think crazy is living in a country with more guns than people and pretending powerlessness is a personality trait." So, on a bright Saturday, when the air smelled of snow that would never fall, Clara drove 40 minutes into the hills with 6 other women who all looked as nervous as she felt. The instructor was a retired sheriff's deputy named Marla, with a gray braid and a voice like warm honey over gravel. She started with the rules. Treat every gun as if it's loaded. Never point at anything you're not willing to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until you've made the decision to shoot. Clara wrote them down like scripture. They began with .22s, tiny, polite guns that felt like toys until the first one cracked and the sound punched a hole straight through the center of her body. By the end of the morning, Clara had fired 50 rounds and hit the paper target maybe 48 times. Her hands shook, but her heart was strangely quiet. Marla handed her a sticker shaped like a pink pistol that read, "This girl can shoot." Clara stuck it on the dashboard of the Highlander, where Ellie found it Monday morning. "Mom, you're a badass now?" "Language," Clara said automatically, then laughed so hard she had to pull over. Word spread the way it does in small desert towns. By spring, Clara was going to the range every other Saturday with a group that called themselves the Cactus Roses. 11 women between 29 and 68 who met to shoot clay pigeons and drink thermos coffee and talk about everything they weren't supposed to talk about. There was Jen, 25, whose boyfriend had put her in the hospital twice before she left him. There was Dolores, 61, whose husband had died of COVID and left her with a house full of his hunting rifles she'd never touched. There was Sarah, 33, an Air Force veteran who said shooting helped quiet the noise in her head. And there was Clara, 38, who discovered that the same hands that once braided Ellie's hair before school picture day could now load a magazine in under 4 seconds. She bought her own gun in July, a Glock 19, because it fit her hand like it had been waiting for her. She kept it locked in a biometric safe bolted to the bedroom floor. Ellie knew the code was her birthday and knew the rule. We touch it only with Mom and only at the range. Some nights Clara sat on the patio cleaning the gun with the same meditative care her grandmother once used to polish silver. The smell of hops number 9 became the scent of competence. Ellie asked once, "Are you scared someone's going to hurt us?" Clara thought about the text message, the foreclosure letter, the nights she'd lain awake listening for footsteps that never came. "No, honey," she said. "I was scared of being helpless. This is the opposite."
In August, Nate flew out for Ellie's 9th birthday. They met at a park because the bungalow felt too small for the history between them. He looked thinner, older. He brought a skateboard Ellie had wanted for 2 years. While Ellie skated circles around the picnic tables, Nate asked Clara how she was, really. She considered lying. Instead, she told him about the range, the women, the first time she shot a plate out of the sky at 100 yards and felt something inside her chest crack open like sunrise. Nate listened without interrupting, which was new. "I'm proud of you," he said finally, "and I hate that I'm proud of you for something I forced you to become." Clara looked at her daughter, ponytail flying as she ollied off a curb, fearless. She said, "You didn't force me. You just moved out of the way." That fall, the Cactus Roses entered a women's charity shoot in Vegas. They wore matching t-shirts that read, "Armed and educated, handle with care." Clara took second place in her division. The prize was a rifle she donated to the range for new shooters who couldn't afford their own. After the awards, a reporter from a local TV station asked why a 4th-grade teacher from Minnesota had taken up competitive shooting. Clara thought of the frozen bird in her hand all those years ago. She thought of Ellie's face the first time she watched her mom shatter a clay pigeon into orange dust. "Because," she said, "I spent a long time believing my job was to keep everyone comfortable. Turns out my job is to keep my daughter safe, and the best way to do that is to stop waiting for someone else to save us." The clip went viral in certain circles. Suddenly, Clara was getting messages from women in Ohio, Texas, Scotland, women who said they'd never touched a gun but wanted to, or who had guns hidden in purses and nightstands and had no idea if they even worked anymore. She and Marla started a new class, Women's Firearms and Fierce Self-Reliance. They capped it at 10 students so nobody got lost. They taught grip, stance, breath control. They also taught how to call a domestic violence hotline, how to file a protective order, how to leave in the middle of the night with only what fits in a backpack. Clara never preached. She just told the truth, that power isn't the gun. The gun is only metal and physics. Power is deciding you will never again measure your worth by how quietly you can endure. 2 years after the text message that upended her life, Clara stood in the desert at dusk with Ellie beside her. They were at the range for the girl's 10th birthday, just the two of them and a box of clay targets painted bright pink. Clara loaded the over-under shotgun they'd rented. Ellie wore neon ear protection that swallowed half her face. "Ready?" Clara asked. Ellie nodded solemn. Clara pulled the trigger. The pink disc arced against the violet sky. Ellie tracked it, squeezed her own smaller trigger, the .410 her mom had bought her for Christmas, with the strictest safety classes in 3 counties. The clay exploded into confetti. Ellie screamed with joy and threw herself into Clara's arms hard enough to stagger them both. Later, driving home under a sky full of stars sharp enough to cut your finger on, Ellie said, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Clara reached over and squeezed her daughter's knee. "Baby," she said, "you already are." And for the first time in years, Clara believed in something without reservation. Not the gun safe in her closet, not the divorce papers gathering dust, not even the desert that had swallowed her grief and given her muscle in return. She believed in the woman she was still becoming, one breath, one round, one sunrise at a time. And that, she understood at last, was the only safety she'd ever needed.